The exam is over, but now for us history teachers and tutors and helpers comes the fun part, breaking down those prompts. Were the predictions right or even close? How easy or difficult were the questions? How might we approach answering them? Will we use these examples to help our students next year? The real fun, though, is that first look. And today you're going to be there with me as I take my very first look at the AP World History SAQs, DBQ, and LEQs. I taught AP World this year, so I have a lot of skin in this particular game. Now, if you're looking for Euro or APWH, those are parts 1 and 3 respectively. I'm releasing them all as a 3-part episode 62. So if you're curious, do check them out. You can listen to them wherever you are listening to this episode. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Substack, Facebook even, a lot of other places. If you are a teacher or you're a student who will be taking an AP History course next year, be sure to follow me. And tell your friends or colleagues. Word of mouth, it's a great way to share the podcast with those who can best benefit from it. And if you'd like to buy me a cup of coffee to show your appreciation, there is a link for that in the show notes. And it's also showing on the screen if you are watching the video. Come on in, students. It's time for another episode of the AP History Help podcast. It's one of a 3-part episode unboxing the AP World Exam FRQs. Last year, I put all 3 courses into one unboxing, and it was nearly impossible to accomplish, and it ended up being way too long. It was over 45 minutes. So I'm going to record myself opening up the AP World FRQs and reading them out loud with my thoughts and reactions in real time. It's kind of like waiting to open my Christmas presents. I hope I get what I wanted. I made some predictions that were posted on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram. I blind ranked some. I just made flat out predictions for the DBQ and the LEQs. So we will see what happens there. All right. So let's open up the present. Okay, let's open up the exam. All right, so starting with the short answer questions, the first one is secondary source, as is usually the case. It threw me for a second there because the author of this source is a U.S. historian of Africa. I'm like, wait, U.S., is this the wrong one? But it's a historian of Africa, the Trans-Saharan Africa in World History, a book published in 2010. The first question asks, describe one likely reason for Mansa Musa's journey to Cairo and Mecca. Boy, this could turn into a long, short answer question. I know you guys want to talk about Mansa Musa, but one likely reason he was going from Cairo to Mecca. Hopefully y'all were like, this is so easy. Like it says in the second line that he was stopping during a pilgrimage to Mecca. Why would he be on a pilgrimage? Yeah. Okay, so pretty easy A question. B, describe. Oh, I noticed describe, and explain. So no identify. Describe one piece of evidence not found in the passage that could be used to support a claim made by the author in the second paragraph, which is carrying gold, accompanied by a large body of followers. The lands to the south of Sahara were organized into large states. Finally, it tells us something about the economic basis for more regular trans-Saharan travel, as gold was of great value for both the Islamic world and Christian Europe during the late Middle Ages. So one piece of evidence not found in the passage that could be used to support a claim made by the author. So here they're testing your knowledge about the Mali, about trans-Saharan trade. I think that there's probably a lot of right answers here, so I don't think that would be hard. And using a specific example, explain how long-distance trade routes affected the societies they connected in the period 1200 to 1450. Notice It says long distance trade routes. It doesn't specify trans-Saharan trade. You could talk about Indian Ocean. You could talk about Silk Road and how they affected the societies they connected. Oh my gosh, that's such a softball question. If you focused on how important trade was in world history in this time period, piece of cake. All right, moving on to our next question. Ooh, also a text-based source. Usually you get one that's text and one that's not text, like a picture, a graph. Anyway, the source is Francis Xavier, a Spanish Jesuit missionary in India, in a letter to the leader of the Catholic Jesuit order in 1549, talking about India converts to Christianity. Okay, so anyway, the questions also describe, and explain. Describe one technology that allowed Europeans in the period 1450 to 1750 to travel to the regions mentioned in the passage. Really? Really? Oh my gosh, such an easy question. If you got that wrong, you were sleeping through Unit 4. Second question, describe one example from any world region that would support the author's claim in the second paragraph about European treatment of indigenous people. So it's a short paragraph. He says, certainly if Portuguese were kinder to new converts to Christianity, a greater number would convert. But as things stand, the Indians see that converts are despised and looked down upon by the Portuguese. So it's natural they are unwilling to become converts themselves. So describe an example from any world region that supports indigenous people being resistant to Europeans, any world region. So you could even do America and the Pueblo revolt. Yeah. Anyway, not a hard question. Not as easy as A, but not a hard question. And then C, explain how missionary activities by religious figures such as Francis Xavier were challenged during the period 1450 to 1850. You know, AP World loves those challenges too, resistance too. So hopefully you had a couple of good examples. Well, actually, so challenges to missionary activities. Yeah, the Pueblo could fit for C, but you couldn't use it for B and C. You'd have to have something different for B and C. Yeah, I like 1 and 2 so far. I see no reason why you can't get at least a 5 out of those 6 points, if not all 6 of those points. All right, and then questions 3 and 4, remember you get to pick 3 or 4. So I'm curious which one you end up picking. So let me know in the comments or send me a message somewhere, anywhere, all the places. Question 3 is describe one geographic or environmental characteristic of Indian Ocean trade network. Wow, a lot of focus on trade here. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted. Describe one geographic or environmental characteristic of the Indian Ocean trade network in the period 1200 to 1450. You mean like the monsoon winds? Too easy. Sorry. Explain how technological or economic developments contributed to the growth of trade in the Indian Ocean in a period 1200 to 1450. Ships, technological or economic developments. Wow. Okay. I'm kind of baffled by the fact that they have such a heavy focus on trade across these SAQs. Because I've already kind of glanced at 4. I know I'm getting ahead of you, but and then C, explain how the growth of trade in the Indian Ocean affected the states or societies in the period 1200 to 1450. Yeah, I mean, I'm not baffled in that I don't know the answer. I'm baffled in that it seems really easy. I'm so happy to see this for my students. And then question 4 is describe one change in global trade during the period 1750 to 1914. Changed in global trade. It could be the end of the African slave trade. Because now we're looking like past that era of transoceanic interconnections past that era of trade. So it could be a change in global trade could be related to who was trading or what was being traded, or the method by which it was being traded, because it doesn't say what kind of change. B, explain how economic or political developments in Europe shaped global trade during the period 1750 to 1914, imperialism. And C, explain how global trade affected non-European states or societies during the period 1750 to 1914. So like B could be about imperialism from the European side of things, and C is imperialism from the non-European states or societies. But yeah, holy cow. No reason not to get all 9 of the SAQ points, even though they're all describes and explains and no identifies. All right, let's move on to our DBQ question. Now, I had predicted that the DBQ, let's see, I wrote it down. The DBQ would be maybe gunpowder empires, maybe Enlightenment, maybe Green Revolution or Little Ice Age, something environmental, and maybe decolonization and the non-aligned movement. And the prompt says, evaluate the extent to which military conflicts in the 20th century changed the role of women in society. I didn't predict that. I didn't even come close to that. I think it's because women were the topic last year, maybe. I don't remember why I wouldn't have brought women in, but I'm glad they did. Military conflicts in the 20th century, World War I, World War II, Russian Revolution, proxy wars, Vietnam, Korea. So, and I always tell you, the role of women in history is important because, number one, it's highly predictable. Women were subjugated for much of history until we get to the 20th century. And then it starts to change. And why does it start to change? And pay attention to the exceptions to women's roles in history. And we see, let's see, document 1. Wow, it starts with 19. Oh, no, wait, I see. I thought it started with 1960. But document 1 is from a Chinese villager interview with a Chinese historian for an oral history project on the 1899 to 1901 Boxer Rebellion. Okay, so we're doing going all the way back to the very beginning of the 20th century with the Boxer Rebellion. Then we have Lady Frances Balfour, British women's rights activist, an article written for a collection of articles by British and Indian authors in support of India's contribution to the British war effort in 1915. So now we're a little bit of imperialism, but moving into World War I. Document 3, strike committee of women workers from Russian textile factory that produced soldiers' uniforms, proclamation to Russian soldiers. So Russian women, 1915. Their revolution hasn't started yet, but we know that times were really challenging in Russia while they were involved in World War I. Then we have an image, the Parisian woman worker before the war / during the war, cover of Le Petit Journal, a French newspaper in Paris in November of 1916. And it's a woman working hard at a machine. It reminds me, if you watched my AP Euro reaction, one of the documents was the munitions girls in Europe. A color picture, just like they have here. It's a picture in color. And she's probably going to be on the cover of my thumbnail for this week, because that's what I did with Euro too. So yeah. Anyway, so again, more World War I. Document 5 is Margarita Robles de Mendoza, a Mexican women's rights activist, the evolution of the Mexican woman, in a book published 1931. So perhaps the Mexican War. So perhaps a Mexican perspective. And one thing I saw on Euro, and I'm seeing it again here in World, is they're defining some words for you. Like there's a word in here, soldadera, and it tells you that it's refers to the many women who actively participated in military conflicts in Mexico during the first half of the 20th century. So that kind of helps contextualize this group of women. Document 6 is Muthoni Kirima, a Kenyan woman, in an interview about the 1952 to 1960 Mau Mau uprising, a revolt against the British colonial rule in Kenya. They skipped right over World War II. Just saying. Um, and so now we're looking at a woman in Africa, an anti-colonial activist. And then document 7 is an anonymous Soviet woman. Interview with a journalist recalling her experience serving in an army as an army nurse during the 79 to 89 Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. So yeah, I mean, evidence beyond the document. You could talk about Rosie the Riveter during World War II as like something to fill that missing gap between the World War I documents and the post World War II documents. But I think that this, you could talk about your contextualization, looking at the role of women and how it kind of started to change with the Industrial Revolution and them starting to work in factories. And now, because they were working in factories, they play a bigger role in much of the rest of history. So our LEQs, let me tell you my predictions for LEQs. So I had decolonization of Africa and Asia, state-directed industrialization, and green revolution as my 3 possible LEQ topics. Let's see if I was even close on these. All right, question 2 of the LEQ, because number 1 is DBQ. Question 2 is, in the period 1200 to 1600, technological innovations, migrations of people, and the expansion of and contraction of religions intensified military conflicts and resulted in numerous wars of conquest. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which military conflicts affected state building in Afro-Eurasia during the period 1200 to 1600. Specific military conflicts? Okay, well, actually, state building. I didn't guess this one, but I feel like Afro-Eurasia. Okay. I feel like we could use gunpowder empires here. Military conflicts affected state building. You want to have more than one piece of evidence. So do you have more than one example of military conflicts? This would include the Mongols. So you've got Mongols, you've got gunpowder empires. I'm drawing a blank, though, for the rest of them. I'm not sure I would jump at this one, but that's just me. Let's see. Number 3 says, in the period circa 1600 to 1900, demographic, economic, and political factors led to large-scale migrations of people, both within and across states, regions, and continents, including voluntary and involuntary migration flows. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which migration of people in the period 1600 to 1900 led to social and or cultural change. All right, well, 1600 to 1900, you got 300 years there, and it encompasses the African slave trade. So the migration could be voluntary or involuntary. 1600 to 1900. So that's the first one that kind of jumps out to me. Then you have like voluntary migrations, people leaving by choice to become indentured servants, perhaps. Yeah, I don't feel like this one would be too challenging. It's okay. 1600s, 1700s, like Industrial Revolution, the age of like moving to the Americas or other colonial places. Not too bad. But I do, so far, based on looking at 2 and 3, I feel like they made the SAQs really easy, and the LEQs are so far feeling a little bit more challenging. And let's see, number 4, The last and final question of the AP World History exam. During the 20th century, individuals, groups, and states organized anti-war movements, created international organizations, and adopted peacemaking policies in order to further peace and avoid future conflicts. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which efforts to promote peace and or avoid international conflict during the 20th century were successful. I would argue that they weren't largely successful. I mean, I think about, okay, so decolonization of Africa and Asia and the non-aligned movement might come into play here, right? The non-aligned movement is like, we're not picking either one of your warring sides. So maybe that would be part of my argument. Efforts, like it's more so than the promote peace part. The effort, it says and or avoid international conflict. So I feel like we could talk about the United Nations being formed in the 20th century after World War II as a world peacekeeping organization. So I've got the non-aligned movement, I got the United Nations. There's two pieces of evidence right there. And by getting into their failure to be successful, the United Nations failure to be successful by failing to stop the different proxy wars or other conflicts that happened, even to stop genocide. Genocide's not very peaceful. I think I would definitely argue that because peace was not achieved, that it was more so that they were not successful. You could talk as sort of a counter argument about détente, about the end of the Cold War by 1991, that ultimately peace was achieved through a lot of unsuccessful attempts at achieving it. All right. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with the fact that the SAQs were pretty darn easy, which, remember, the SAQs are weighted more than the LEQs. The SAQs are worth 20% of your grade, whereas the LEQs are only worth 15. So don't worry if you feel like you didn't do that great on the LEQs, and if you feel like you did great on the SAQs, because that's going to help your grade better. So there you go. How do you think you did? What LEQ did you write about? I hope that this podcast has given you some help over the course of the school year. I am really looking forward to next season, which will start on August 10th. And I am looking for suggestions for episodes next season. When I started this podcast almost 3 years ago, I had already pretty much mapped out the first 3 seasons, believe it or not. And here I am, end of the 3rd season, thinking, what am I going to do with next season that is going to best benefit my students and my teacher peers to help them to get through the course? What are you looking for that you have difficulty finding? Should I have an occasional guest? Should I dive deeper into content, skills? Please comment on this episode wherever you're watching it, or email me at wendy@aphistoryhelp.com, or follow me on Substack, where everything is free. Across the board, you can find me as at AP History Help on all of the socials. aphistoryhelp.com is my website. I do have 2 accounts on YouTube. The full-length podcasts are on AP History Help, but I also put up shorts almost every day at AP History Help Shorts. So make sure to follow me and interact with me, because I think the best content is the content that we collaborate on. In the meantime, my challenge for you for this summer is to read something every week, create something every week, and connect with someone every week. You'll feel better and more accomplished for it. I'll still post on the socials over the summer, so stay connected with me on TikTok, YouTube, Shorts, Instagram, and Facebook. And with that, this episode of the AP History Help podcast is now history. Have a great summer.